China considered as a primary and generic producer, right? So, what is the single biggest sign that the industry has fundamentally changed and how fast this progress is happening? Because sometimes India also claim that we are the most in this generic producing market.
China is now developing treatments in high value areas like cancer, diabetes, obesity, and the focus is shifting to first in class and best in class therapeutic programs. That is coming from China-originated drugs. It's projected to reach over $200 billion by 2040, right? So these drugs are projected to account for almost a third of United States FDA approvals by that year.
What is the measurable operational advantage that China offers that in the drug development side for sure, that Western partners or Western countries are?
Well, when we talk about clinical development, we care about three things: speed, scale, and cost clinical trials. China offers structural advantages in clinical development across those three domains, right? China, because of their large treatment naive patient populations in many disease areas like oncology. In oncology, for example, we are seeing over 150% growth in the number of trials in the same period that I just mentioned. When it comes to cost efficiency, clinical trial costs in China are generally 25 to 40% less than they are in the United States.
Hello everyone. Welcome in the another episode of 21-minute Pharma Edge powered by Game of Pharma. And today we have with us a very special guest, Dr. Julien Willard. He is a former senior intelligence officer and a health economist. In the world of strategy consulting, it's very uncommon that we have a profile like this who had navigated meetings with head of states before advising Fortune 500 clients. And Julian is one of them. He has also served as strategy executive at Accenture, IBM, and was an economist at the World Bank. Welcome on the show, Julian.
Well, thank you for having me here.
Yep, I'm too excited to having conversation with you because the topic that we are currently discussing, I think every part of the world wants to know about this, right? And especially someone who is very resonated with this life science industry, right? So start with our first thing, right? So still in the whole world, okay, China considered as a primary in generic producer, right? So what is the single biggest sign that the industry has fundamentally changed, okay? And how fast this progress is happening? Because sometimes India also claim that we are the most in this generic producing market, right?
All right, well, let's talk about China. This is definitely a topic of the year. The single biggest thing is the quantitative scale of innovation.
Right.
By 2024, the number of innovative drugs that came from China rose to over 1,000 drugs. That is a level that has surpassed Europe and is very quickly catching up with the United States, right? China is now developing treatments in high value areas like cancer, diabetes, obesity, and the focus is shifting to first in class and best in class therapeutic programs, moving away from simply putting together these what we used to call Me Too programs, or pilot on the old targets. So the progress that we're seeing in Chinese biotech is exponential. One analyst that I was recently talking to actually noted that the shift in the biotech quality is so fast, you notice meaningful change almost every few months. It's evolving like a 4-year-old child, right? And when it comes to the financial part, the financial validation is also tremendous. If you look at the annual revenue that is coming from China-originated drugs, it's projected to reach over $200 billion by 2040, right? So these drugs are projected to account for almost a third of United States FDA approvals by that year. Today we're at about 5%. So this is a significant leap.
I agree, and with that innovation kind of sort, they are trying their best in the China, right? And in this generic markets, right, many countries are depended on China, right? And I think, like this whole life sciences scenario, I think we can understand from that. Vaccine war as well, right? Where China, US, and every country was fighting, right? That who can launch
Hmm.
it, and then now with the changing policies in the US, right? It's a hot topic, not for the US only or India, China only. I think for the whole world. But that brings us to deal making as well, right? Global pharma companies, right? You can name anyone, are increasing their licensing assets from China, right? Uh,
Hmm.
is this just the volume game, okay? Or does it signal growing confidence in the quality of Chinese science, right? And what are the specific modalities are global player clamoring for, right? And then I think sometimes in the generic market, quality consideration is also important, right?
Yes.
In the generic market. So I think this question is really important here.
Yeah, so there is this is an absolutely signal of growing confidence in the quality that is coming from China and Chinese innovation. So Western companies are looking to China to diversify and future-proof their portfolios due to major patent expirations, as you know, looming. We're expecting that about over $100 billion will be threatened in revenue for the United States and European firms by 2035. So the flow of deals highlights the quality of the innovation and the financial strategy. First, there is a focus on cutting edge biologics. The high value deals are concentrated in complex biologics, not just small molecules. In 2024, for example, modalities like ADCs or antibody drug conjugates, multispecific monoclonal antibodies, and T cell engagers were the focus of over 40% of the deals, right? And if you look at the upfront payments that happened during that year, almost almost 70% of the total upfront payments were related to ADCs, T cell engagers, and multispecific monoclonal antibodies. The second thing is we're seeing early stage confidence. I recently participated in another podcast where I was talking about royalty financing. Royalty financing in the United States is primarily focused on the late stage assets. What we're seeing in China is there's a lot of confidence in the early stage financing, early stage investment. So Western confidence is so high, the deals are occurring very early. In 2024, just last year, over 70% of the deals involved preclinical or phase one assets. This suggests that multinational companies that you were talking about, the Fortune 500 pharmaceuticals, they trust the underlying science and they are willing to take that development risk, which is very unique. And the third thing, when it comes to financial, it's a financial incentive. So the out licensing model is incredibly attractive financially. It offers those Fortune 500 companies almost an 80% discount in net value compared to traditional mergers and acquisition deals. And finally, when I think about the scale of the deal making, that scale is also accelerating. If you look at this year alone, we had almost 64, let me check my notes. Yeah, 64 deals worth up to $70 billion that were signed just in 2025, right? And molecules licensed by large pharmaceutical firms from China are now projected to increase to 40% in 2025. So this is significant, and this is the time that we start paying attention.
I think that data showcase, right, how the things are changing, right? And what I have understood is that this is not just about the output, right? Uh, okay. it's also about that how uh, they have created that whole ecosystem, right? That whole
Hmm.
infrastructure, that engine for that train, right? That is going and going and increasing the speed, right? How did like I just want to understand, okay, how did China build this highly efficient R&D infrastructure so quickly? Because I
Hmm.
think most of the countries started this game with at the same pace, okay? But why they are so fast in their things, right? And how they did all the things so quickly.
You are spot on in saying that we will first discuss the outcome, the product that everybody is now excited about. However, the engine of pharma and biopharma is our research and development, right? So the rapid ascent in R&D is the result of the focused national strategy, massive government support that I think is unparalleled. We're not seeing anywhere else the level of support that the government of China has provided to R&D in biopharma, and the structural advantages in terms of talent that is available and also operations. So let's unpack this. So first is the human capital. Uh, China produces about 5 million science graduates a year, STEM graduates a year. Critically, a large portion of Chinese students educated abroad, right? So over 4 million students actually go overseas. But what's interesting is they choose to return home to work in academia or industry. So they go to top schools, they come back and they contribute to the growth of the economy, which is very different from other countries where usually we see in Europe, for example, myself, I'm an immigrant to the United States, where we get our education somewhere and we stay there, right? So why is it happening? So in China, they are attracted by the available resources and capital. And in fields like synthetic biology, China's researchers now publish 60% of the most cited research papers. If you compare to the American research, we only contribute about 10% of that synthetic biology research in, in peer-reviewed research, right? So the second thing is the state infrastructure. The government designated biotech as a strategic emerging industry. Have you ever seen anywhere in the world the declaration like that? So this led to the construction of high-tech science parks like BioBay that pool scientific expertise, provide infrastructure, facilitate access to venture capital funding and resources for startups. And once students graduate from top biology, biomedicine schools anywhere else, they are incentivized to return to BioBay and start producing. The third thing is the regulatory efficiency. China started reforms around 2015. It included shortening timelines for drug trials, accelerating approvals for drugs. They have an agency that's called NMPA, which is a Chinese FDA equivalent. They joined the International Council for Harmonization. So all these three things, they have and these are systematic changes that the government of China has implemented that are working for them. And I hope that these changes will work for the patients and for the world.
I think spot on the fact that when your own people, right, go into the foreign top colleges and then come back and then start research in your own country, right? It creates a lot of value, not in terms of the research only, in terms of the further education of your own people, right? Because they are b- b- in the academia of your own in your own country and telling the global concepts, right? That in the global this kind of perspectives that the people follow, right? And then when the global perspectives come on a single table, I think it creates a lot value, right? And I think the same, I think you are aware of that whatever the visa changes that done by the US government, right, recently, I think it impacted a lot people, a lot immigrants that of India, right? And I think Indian government now is trying that those people come back, start their own venture because they know that if someone started his business and know the global perspective of any sort of industry, it will create value for this country, right? And I think China is already doing this one, right? But I think in this whole ecosystem, uh, a focus area is also clinical trials, right?
Mhm.
And in clinical trials, we have heard about sprint execution, right? Like there are both, okay, for every country in the clinical trial side, they have their operational advantages as well and operational disadvantages as well, okay. But in terms of the China, what is the measurable operational advantage that China offers, that in the drug development side for sure,
Mhm.
that partners or Western countries are leveraging?
Well, when we talk about clinical development, we care about three things: speed, scale, and cost of clinical trials. China offers structural advantages in clinical development across those three domains, right? On a scale of trials, China has already surpassed the United States as a site for clinical development. If you look at the clinical trial activity that took place between 2017 and let's say 2021, 2022, that clinical trial activity more than doubled from 3,000 trials to over 6,500 trials, which is unprecedented. When it comes to speed, we care about finding the right patients at the right time and recruiting those patients. And then we care about retaining those patients for as long as we can in the trial, right? Well, hopefully until the very end. On speed in patient recruitment, recruitment is much faster in China because of their large treatment naive patient populations in many disease areas like oncology. On oncology, for example, we are seeing over 150% growth in the number of trials at this in the same period that I just mentioned. And when I say treatment naive, meaning these populations have never been treated with anything for their disease, which is very rare. For anecdotal evidence of speed, this is demonstrated by the recent Hengrui-Kylera partnership, which I urge everybody to investigate. This partnership enrolled and reported out a phase 3 obesity trial in China in less than 15 months. So this pace means they effectively leapfrogged many global competitors in the race against Eli Lilly's retatrutide. When it comes to cost efficiency, clinical trials, clinical trial costs in China are generally 25 to 40% less than they are in the United States, which is extremely attractive. And finally, and this is what we're trying to build here in the United States, or advance, I should say, is the ecosystem. And in China, there is the ecosystem. Chinese biotechs have access to a superb contract research organization system. Um, Experts, in fact, suggest that the cross border structures bringing Western clinical programs to China are an obvious idea to optimize returns by leveraging lower costs and faster execution, which which is what is starting to happen when the Fortune 500 pharmaceutical companies are starting to look to leverage um, Chinese CRO infrastructure for the clinical trial purposes.
I think cost is something that every global pharma is look for, right? And the same reason, right? Every company is working on a lot of projects. Like for everyone, the onco is something that is priority for everyone. obesity, diabetes drug is the priority, right? So everyone wants to the save money, and then Chinese infrastructure uh, give that things, right? That uh, like we are the cost effective at the same time, as you mentioned, that good with the infrastructure kind of sort, and the government is also helping their side, right? So thank you so much, Julian, for being on this show. I really enjoyed this conversation, and I think your that advisory and strategic mindset helped us to create a consulting deck from all these questions. Okay, so thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you, man. Thank you.